Mark.
What the hell was that? I feel like I should be talking like this. What the hell was that? What's
Okay, well, the
all
funny
this
thing is,
AI doing?
okay, so those who don't know, normally we have a slightly classier piano entry theme, but I found this one, and it was when I was first preparing this whole podcast, and I was experimenting with various versions of the theme, and the Seinfeld theme was actually done on the very same keyboard that I had, which was a Korg M1. And that's the bass patch for the Seinfeld theme. So I thought, well, I'll do a version with yeah.
So you didn't like run it through some sort of Seinfeldizer AI?
No, just it was the old Korg M1 bass patch there.
That is so cool. I heard on the CBC. This is really off base, but I heard on the CBC this week about how the sounds of the loon. You know, the loons have those two calls. That the glissando sort of one, like the ooh one. That one was shipped in synthesizers in the 80s. It is buried in so many different songs. It was amazing. They just played a couple clips from a handful of them, but so many disco songs and so many dance music songs.
Oh wow! I want to hear that now.
I know you'll hear it probably because I'm definitely going to be listening for it now that I know that it's it. It was so it shipped with the synthesizers. So it's just lots of people played with it. Yeah,
the things you learn in this podcast.
Okay, so people can learn a bit more now. I'm always trying to find out more about you, Joe, because we've been friends for 20 years, but there's things I don't know. Do you have a favorite form of poetry?
Favorite form of poetry.
I know it's a really obscure question. It just popped into my head literally seconds ago.
Okay, the thing about poetry is I've never been able to write it because I don't have any sense of poetry. I do admire it. There's a few stanzas from William Blake that I trot out all the time that I love. You know, joy and woe or woven fine, like that one.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say Tiger, Tiger.
Burning bright. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I mean, so there's a few little, but favorite, you know, and haiku is not my favorite, but I will say that I saw something funny the other day about, it was somebody being trapped in a haiku. You know, it's, and I wish I could quote it and, maybe I'll
it's
find
interesting
it
you say that because haiku used to be my favorite. In fact, it probably still is. But for a while there, I was really into it. I actually had a couple of poems published in Japan. The Mainichi Daily News used to have a weekly contest where you could send in your English haiku, and they would publish the best of them. And I had a couple published. So yeah, I used to love haiku, and I still kind of dig it. I'm hoping our guest has a favorite form of poetry.
Abigail Grimes, welcome to our podcast, Recreative.
Thank you. That's a very interesting question, and I've been more known for writing poetry than anything else.
So then, what kind of poetry are you writing?
Well, it's interesting. I just kind of fell backwards into writing poetry. I was kind of just writing these kind of letters to no one, right? And, you know, oh, here's a flower in my garden. And I would write this short form prose thing. And somebody said to me, oh, that was a beautiful poem. And I was like, that's a poem? What are you talking about? Okay. And so I just kind of immersed myself in that kind of writing. And I say to these other poets who this concept that I have in my head of what a poem is supposed to be and who poets are and how they're to perform just, you know, continually gets knocked out of the water, blown out of the water, exploded out of the water. Because, you know, clearly, you know, all through high school, I had these very immature notions about these rhyming schemes and things like that.
Yeah.
Then putting it away for a very long time, not realizing that I am in fact writing poetry until somebody else points it out. And then, you know, me saying to these people, oh, that's a poem. Okay, I guess I write poetry now.
Yeah. Okay, let's take this opportunity to then explain what else you do. So, so tell us about your writing career and your writing. And
So I am a multi-genre writer, because now I can add poetry in there. I've written creative nonfiction. I write a lot about women and their relationships with their mothers, their families. I write just all manner of like messy stuff too, and
Messy's good.
Yeah, yeah. Messy's very good. There's so much to do in Messy.
Yeah,
you can deal with like the work that I'm the novel that I'm working on right now is about these people who are just so incredibly self-destructive and destructive to one another, and all of these absurd justifications that they have for their behavior. And, how people kind of manage that. Like, this person is feeling super guilty, but continues doing what they're doing. And this person has justified the heck out of what they're doing, and they just keep doing what they're doing. And everyone's on a path to destruction. So it's quite interesting.
There's so many things actually I want to ask you in so many different directions. But first I should explain that. So we met. I held with my friend Pat Flewelling and a few other friends a book market, which we called book market actually, in Whitby a few years ago. And you were one of the folks that signed up and came and sold your books. And I know that you're planning on doing something similar, and we'll talk about that later. What were you selling at that time? What books did you bring to that market?
That market, I write under a different name sometimes. And so when I'm writing more salacious material, when I'm writing erotica,
okay,
I write under the name Casey Thompson. So Casey had her books there.
Right.
I have to separate the personalities, right? So Casey had her stuff there. I wasn't there yet.
I love it.
I think I was confused too at the time because that was the name that you had brought. And then I'm like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah, and I signed all of my paperwork, Abigail Grimes.
Yeah.
all this Casey Thompson stuff. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, Casey writes some pretty spicy stuff. And I think at the time I had a workbook. It's called 69 Prompts for Writers of Erotica.
Nice.
And yeah, very subtle, right?
I do believe that you're our first writer of erotica on this podcast. So yeah, congratulations.
Groundbreaking.
but you write all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And
so now, I mean, I was just at a market yesterday, and Casey was there and Abigail was there. And so Casey just recently came out with a short story collection called Casey's Shorts. On the cover are some folks wearing short pants. And on the Abigail Grimes side, I have my poetry and prose collection For the Quiet and the thriller The Violence of Fire.
Yeah, and I saw both of those up on Amazon and well reviewed. Casey, so the name Casey, where did that come from?
My middle name is Cassandra. So kind of that's the name, and telling secrets out of school here. That's the name that you use at the bar when you don't want somebody to know your actual name. So,
okay. These are many secrets you're telling us here.
I know, right?
It's a magic microphone. It makes you tell it off. Only the truth.
I never required that trick.
Yeah.
And the thriller, is it got any, like what's the setting for the thriller that you've written?
It takes place in Toronto. I work in a courthouse in my real life, quotation marks. My 9 to 5, let me put it that way. Yeah. So my 9 to 5 takes place in a courthouse, and the people that are in this book are lawyers and paralegals, and the paralegal that is working with this particular lawyer becomes obsessed with her, and he does some very unfortunate things to show that he would like to be with her.
Oh boy.
So stalker territory.
Scary.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Was that presumed innocent, the Harrison Ford that had?
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Bunch of classic stalkers. Yeah. Thinking what the Glenn Close one, Fatal Attraction.
Oh God. Yeah. Fatal Attraction.
Yeah.
And that's actually a really good comparable.
Oh yeah.
Are they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would think. Yeah.
So I know that you've done your homework and picked a piece of art, and which is interesting because so you haven't mentioned that you write speculative fiction, but you have chosen a speculative fiction subject.
Yeah, and I didn't mention it because I guess I haven't just had the opportunity yet. I'm just talking and maybe words will fall out of my face. Yeah. So one of the works in progress I'm currently should be working on, is a speculative fiction piece. It's called For the Love of Cain. So for now, it's called For the Love of Cain.
Right.
And it's set
working
in this
title.
Right, not so distant future where things aren't going well. Things aren't going well. But people don't understand that things aren't going well because they have been kind of evolved in this society, this one particular country called Cain, where you are sort of bred to fall in love. So you get to a certain age, you go to this function, and you sort of like imprint on somebody, and then that person is your mate, and off you go for the rest of your life, kind of thing.
Right.
The theory is that if you find fulfillment, you aren't searching for it elsewhere, and so you can concentrate on your work. Right. We want you to do this task for us until your fingers bleed, and then off you expire. So we don't want you wasting any time at the clubs, changing your name, doing whatever it is that you got to do to find this person, and then being sad when you can't find the person, right? Like take all of that energy, focus it elsewhere.
Huh.
So, of course, the question becomes, well, what happens when people die? Young, in particular.
Right.
And so how do people move on? Are they able to? And the way that they are structured, they can't. So somebody comes up with a way to kind of break the spell, so to speak, and all pandemonium breaks out because of that. Because, of course, the people who can access this are corrupt and rich and so
the usual.
Yeah.
So it sounds good.
Yeah. So okay, so that's your work in progress.
Yeah, that's your work in progress. That's definitely speculative fiction.
So yeah.
So I take it is there a connection then between that and the piece that you've chosen to talk about?
No, actually, what I think is interesting about what I've chosen to talk about. So I've chosen to talk about Fahrenheit 451.
Yes. Ray Bradbury.
This very scary prognosticator.
Yeah.
Or brilliant prognosticator, I guess. He wrote this book, and I didn't get around to reading it in high school. It wasn't one of the things that I was reading. And so way out here later in my life, I'm picking up all these classics, and I'm like, well, what is this one about? Everybody read this in grade 10. What's this one about? So I read it, and I'm sitting on the GO train, and I'm, adjusting my earphones, and I'm reading this thing about these seashells that people put in their ears. And I'm looking around as everybody's just watching their screens, and everybody's so completely zoned out. And I was like, good God, we're here. How did you know? And so once I read it, I had to talk to like everybody about it. I'm like, oh my gosh, did you read Fahrenheit 451? And they're like, yeah, like 20 years ago. Get with the program, Abby. I'm like, no, you got to read it again. You got to read it now.
Huh. Wow. Because I'm embarrassed to admit that I haven't read it. And, and I've read an awful lot of science fiction and fantasy.
I would imagine so. Yeah.
Yeah. And haven't got to that yet. So, okay. So tell me why I should read it. Why should all the rest of us read it?
Oh my goodness. Well, particularly in this day and age, this conversation about banning books, it's so rampant, particularly in the States, but we're seeing it happening here in Canada. I was reading an article just the other day about these series of books by Indigenous authors that were being banned in the Durham Region School Board, or up for discussion with regard to being banned. And it's interesting from so I'm not a parent, so it's interesting, academically, looking at this situation where you have people who may or may not have read this book, who have such power and influence over whether or not someone else's child will be able to read this book and gain that kind of insight, or, see the world through another person's eyes that they don't want their child to experience for whatever reason. And so, on this sort of through this academic lens, I'm concerned and thinking about, what's happening all around the world, Congo, Sudan, Palestine, the States, like everywhere, and how we are just kind of lulled into this, I don't know, almost numbness of information, wherein we were not able to, take in the information and assimilate the information, understand the information in any way that will help us to move forward with our own lives, or to process our grief, or to help a cause that you might want to get involved in, or, being able to argue one side of an issue or another side of an issue. And the fact that, back in 1950, hang on a second, I got the book right beside me. I'm going to, 1951.
Yeah.
Copyright 1951.
Okay.
So yes. So during this, Cold War, McCarthy scare, this whole, Red Scare situation going on in the States at that time, and this concern about the dawn of television and what it would mean. And here we are, more than 50 years later, reaping the consequences of not taking the warning. And that, I think, is why you should read it. I don't
because
think
it's not too late.
I don't
take
think
the warning.
I don't think it's too late.
It's still relevant, that book. I agree. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
And I imagine, having read his other stuff, it's probably beautifully written as well.
Oh yeah.
Like the Martian Chronicles is, we started talking about poetry. It's almost poetry.
See, I haven't read those. I've read this one, but I haven't read those.
Well, what's interesting is one of the criticisms about the book is that it's so beautiful that you can hardly take it seriously. And of course, that criticism was written in 1980 something. And I have to say, as a person who apparently writes poetry, that is the way to
you've been informed.
Make it make sense, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to write something that is so beautiful to be able to get past the horror of it, so to speak. There's a part in the book, and I mean, you haven't read it. I don't want to spoil it for you, but there's a part of the book where, there's this conflict going on, and you don't even really realize what's happening. And I think that's the whole point, right? You have it's set in this time when people aren't reading books, and it's in fact illegal to own books in your house, and every wall is a television screen, and they're talking about maybe getting one for the ceiling. And you are so absolutely immersed in all of this trite nonsense.
So he was writing it as you said that, it was the dawn of television at the time.
Yeah.
So the book was written as a response to the advent of television in part.
Yeah.
You think? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was also during the McCarthy era, right?
Yeah.
So that was probably, I would say.
And you speak out, you get blacklisted, you can't work. And
I found this is totally trivia, but I posted this on my Mastodon a couple weeks ago, and I learned that did you know how he wrote the book?
No.
So he typed the book up on an old Remington typewriter, an old coin-operated Remington typewriter. Took a dime. Yeah. A dime got you 30 minutes. And he bought himself a roll of dimes and went to the base. I think it's the UCLA, the basement.
The UCLA library,
the Powell Library. And there was like a room full of these old typewriters. And I guess they weren't that old at that point. So that's how he wrote the book. And it's like, that's just amazing. The stress that must have been, because 10 cents back then was actually a lot of money.
Yeah.
So he did that because that was his only means.
That was his only means. Yeah. Yeah. Someone else told me that he and his wife were quite poor. They were trying to live off his writing income, and they lived above a gas station, and their phone was like the public phone at the gas station. He was always listening for it in case he got a good call from an editor or an agent or something. Yeah. But I was like, wow, that's stressful. That's what happens. Can you imagine getting to the last few pages and running out of dimes?
And you run out of dimes.
I just went, oh my God.
Okay, I'm finishing up a work right now. I feel like I'm running out of metaphorical
dimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be a good T-shirt, running out of dimes.
So Ray Bradbury. I read this book one time about him and John Huston, and a little bit of it was kind of a sad. He used to write fan mail to John Huston, like when John Huston, the director, was making his first movies, like The Maltese Falcon, and he just loved this work and wanted to work with him, wanted to write for him. So John Huston hired him eventually to write a draft of Moby Dick because he wanted to adapt Moby Dick. And when they were filming it, he invited Ray Bradbury to the set and then proceeded to just pick on him and basically like bully him. And about things like, because Ray Bradbury he didn't want to like drive in a car or something. And, Houston's like, you're a science fiction writer and you won't drive in a car. But, apparently there were these contradictions. And then so poor Bradbury went away disillusioned with, the whole having to separate the man from his art business. John Huston with, who was kind of who could be a jerk apparently. But made great movies.
Yeah. And that's that, separating, as you said, separating the artist from the art.
Don't meet your heroes.
Don't meet your heroes. My goodness.
Yeah.
Actually, that's not always true. Quite often they are as
good in the writing world, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe.
Because we're meeting a few of our heroes in this podcast,
and they're
not
folks.
disappointing.
Yeah, they're
generally.
Nice. Yeah, they have been. Yeah.
Yeah. Who are your literary heroes other than maybe Ray Bradbury?
Oh, no. Let's see. Literary heroes. I'm really enjoying. See, I find hero really, like, that's a big word.
Maybe a problematic word for the reasons that we just mentioned.
Could be.
Yeah. So
are there writers that inspire you though? That
Yeah. I really like Greg Iles. He writes a lot about what's going on in Mississippi from the perspective of a lawyer, which is, I mean, I work in a courthouse. I clearly I cannot get away from that influence. So, but he writes very honestly about the situation for white people in the South and Black people in the South. And there's a book that he wrote a few years ago called Cemetery Road. And it's so, I keep using the word beautiful, but it's really, really poignant. Like it's telling the story about a man coming home and dealing with his dying father and having to take over their business, and all of these old tragic pains from the past, from his father's, past, are coming forward into this character's life, and all of this stuff with the Klan and stuff that was going on so many years ago that they thought that they had moved away from, and literally physically moving away from it, and now having to come back, or you've moved on, because that's not how it is anymore. But yeah, there's this,
it's still there
this underseat of tension that's still there. So I really like his books. When I first started reading his books, I was concerned because I was really wondering, like, what perspective are you coming from when you're writing this book? Because I don't want to, really like your work and then come to find out that, this person's a super huge problem. But it does not seem to be that case. So, and I hope that remains, the case. But so I really like Greg Iles. All that to say, I really like Greg Iles. I just read, and I have to, of course, shout out my buddy, Craig Shreve's The African Samurai.
I think I've heard
Oh
of
my
that.
goodness.
Great title.
It's about this African slave who becomes the first foreign-born samurai, like, ever in feudal Japan. His name is Isuke. And, there's a anime about it, and there's all these TV shows and movies that have, or not movies, TV shows and books that have been written about it. And I'm hoping that this book gets optioned for a movie, because I think it would be incredible. Craig is an excellent, excellent writer. He wrote a book a few years ago called One Night in Mississippi. And I thought it was about one thing. Read it's completely about something absolutely different than what I thought it was going to be about. Again, excellent writer. So I am very lucky to know folks like you and Craig and be able to tap into all of this wonderful writery genius all around me.
I'm not sure that, certainly would include Mark in that, but
I'm going to include you in that.
Well, it's very kind. Thank you. Now, okay, so people listening can't see this, but because we didn't give you enough time off the top to successfully hide your background, I know you were trying to do that trick on Zencastr and, that we do on Google and Zoom and whatnot, yes, to hide the background and make it look like we're all sitting in fancy cafes or something. You did not manage to do that. Behind you, we see a whole bunch of boxes, which you have told us is filled with books.
Yes.
Why do you have all these boxes filled with books behind you, aside from the fact that you're a writer?
Well, I'm not allowed to read. Well, I guess I can read the books if I wanted to, but I am opening a bookstore. I decided, gosh darn it.
Wow.
that I live in rural Clarington, rural Durham region. So east of Toronto, like the very east before you get to, I don't know, what's that? Port Hope, Coburg, that region there. And
right. Okay. Yeah. Right.
We don't have like a local bookshop in Clarington. We don't have like a space where writers can, get together. And I have this vision. I just have been having this vision in my head for a number of years now that, I'm going to open this bookshop cafe. And my husband keeps telling me, like, you're going to make coffee. You're going to serve coffee. Like, oh, dude, you're going to do that part. No, don't drink coffee if he's made the coffee.
Okay.
But,
noted.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, that's important.
Congratulations.
Noted.
I mean,
yeah, that's cool.
What an awesome decision. And so, okay, how far into this process are you?
Very, very early going. So how it actually kind of kicked off was I was hosting an event called the Grown Folks Book Fair. And it happened on the 8th of June. It was Saturday night, and I had invited some of my indie author friends and some traditionally published author friends, and Craig Shreve was there, and that was really kind of him to come to read some of their work. And I wanted it to be kind of like this scholastic book fair with like this grown-up vibe. So it's at this coffee shop, wine bar, and we had lovely food to eat. And I was trying to entice an indie bookstore to come and sell their books there.
Right.
Because, extending your reach into the community and networking and building community, I figured it would be a good idea for us writers to have a bookstore there.
Yeah, it's
have this relationship
idea.
with.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it didn't quite work out. And I wanted Craig to have an opportunity to have his book represented. So I didn't know how to do that. And so I was, Googling stuff and how do you do this and what does it mean and all this. Anyway, came to this place where I was ordering these books in for him because, of course, when I first heard Craig read, his book wasn't out yet. And I thought to myself, when he read this excerpt, I was like, I want this book and I want it right now. And I don't know how to get it. And of course, it wasn't coming out for several more months. So I didn't want anybody else to kind of be in that position where they had to leave there and let that kind of fire maybe die down a little bit and then maybe come across it in a bookstore. I wanted it right there. So I contacted his publisher and I said, well, I want X number of copies. And so I started looking into how to get these books and whatnot. And so I thought to myself, why don't I just be the bookstore? That sounds like a great idea. So Quips and Quills was born June 2024.
Quips and Quills.
Quips and Quills. Great name.
Awesome.
Yeah, love the name.
Thanks.
It's right up there with Cassie.
And there's there's quaffing at this Quips and Quills. Right?
Coffee. Yeah. There's coffee at the
Quaffing the coffee.
Huh.
So one day, if I get, the opportunity to have this brick and mortar location, I'm hopeful that the events like maybe Book Market will be there, and more grown folks book fairs and things like that. So
I love that so much.
And how close are you to then getting a bricks and mortar location?
Oh, that is a down the road kind of situation. At the moment, Quips and Quills, gets packed into my car and I go do vendor markets around Ontario. So
okay.
Like a pop-up kind of thing almost.
Yeah. Right now it's a pop-up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's awesome. That's a great way to start, I think.
I think so.
Yes.
And what I'm finding is people are asking me, where's the location? Where is it? I want to come. And that just kind of gives me more fuel to ensure that I actually go down that route.
How do you decide what books to carry?
I think it's a lot of, at the moment, whatever I'm seeing that really kind of speaks to me and what I'm not seeing a lot of. I you go into like a place like Chapters or Chapters, and
that's kind of it, isn't it?
That's really kind of
which
it.
is a sad statement. Yeah.
And while the place is huge, when you first walk in, you're really kind of, I don't know, shown their view of what they think people should be reading. And I often don't find the book that I want on that table or on those front displays. So I want to showcase a lot more Canadian authors, and I want a lot more independent authors. I want people who you can actually like reach out and touch, so to speak, and who I could invite to come and we'll read and have lovely conversations like we did on the 8th of June. So I want those books there. I want your book there. I want your book.
we want our books there.
I'll send you my book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Please,
one you want. All of them if you want. I'll come and do a reading too.
Oh, wonderful. Yay.
So do you do, is it like a consignment arrangement then that you do, or?
Yeah. So I'm thinking about that right now. I was actually talking to a friend of mine who has children's books, because that's the other thing. When I typically go to these events, it's like 90% kid lit and not a lot of fiction, and certainly not a lot of erotica, right? So trying to get into spaces that will feature the adult reader, not the adult reader, but an adult reader, has been a little bit challenging. So I definitely want to, encourage folks who are writing like fiction to bring me their book, tell me about their book, and then we'll have readings and we'll do things like that. But is it consignment? No, I don't want to do it on a consignment basis. I would rather buy the book and then, so you get your money right up front.
So that's good for the author, but I imagine that's quite a risk for you.
A risk.
Really.
Yeah. But that's how indie bookstores have treated me. And so I thought that was it's a really honorable thing to do, right? They're taking the risk. They're taking the risk on you. They're showing that they're willing to invest in you. And so, they put your book in that local author section and guide people to that section when they come in the door. I think that's important. And it builds
it is great. And it has not been my experience.
Yeah.
In my experience, it's been consignment.
Yeah.
And then you're lucky if they remember you later.
Right.
It's like, wait, where did those books go?
Exactly.
Well, and then if you're an indie author, then you have to, make sure you're on top of it. It's very easy to not make sure you've checked with all the bookstores you've left your book with, and
absolutely,
it's a lot more work.
Yeah, there is a certain bookstore in Toronto that has copies of my books, and I have not seen any checks. You know who you are.
Oh dear.
Yeah, and I don't want that. Like, I don't want that kind of. I would feel too guilty. I would feel too guilty.
But you have to be a business person as well.
100%.
So at these events, are you finding that you're selling the books?
Yeah, actually, I did an event yesterday, and I was selling books. I sold a couple of my own, and that always feels really, really good.
Yeah.
But I sold some from the bookstore, which felt absolutely great.
Cool.
Yeah, and what I find interesting about that, because I do a lot of pop-up markets down here in the East Coast,
Yeah.
New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island and Nova Scotia, and my sense is that they want to have an interaction with the person who wrote the books.
Yes.
And I do carry some books written by other people and plan to expand that in the future with my little publishing company.
Yeah.
And I was wondering how that would work. Would people be responsive to purchasing books from you that were not written by you? But so your experience is positive.
Yeah, it has been. It's been really nice to see that. I think people just want to have an interaction with somebody who has an emotional connection to what is going on here, right? Like, not, I understand what it's like on the author side, but and it's very important to me that you want to meet me and you want to talk about these books and learn all about that stuff. But you also want to know that I'm excited about other people's work and that this is not just this, ego stroking endeavor. And not to say that, if you want to sell your book and that's all you want to do, that is 100% understandable. It's hard enough as it is. Mm-hmm. But that there is really this community, and this other person's success does speak to you being successful, right? Like you want people to want to read, which is also a reason why I think Fahrenheit 451 is so very interesting.
The irony that you're opening a bookstore and this is the book that you want to talk about is like the opposite of what is happening in that story.
I know. And I mean, I think honestly, the fire chief in that story, I have this contention that this person is, so for the state and they've drank the Kool-Aid, for lack of a better phraseology there. But I wonder, I think about that and how easily this person is quoting all of these random excerpts from these books. I'm like, this is the guy that is really the subversive character here.
Yeah.
Like, you got to watch him. But, things don't work out so well for him in the end anyway.
God, as usual, you've, given me, as guests on this podcast do, more stuff to want to read. My book pile gets higher and higher.
My TBR pile is just, I'm never going to get through it, but that's fine. I'm going to keep adding to it.
Absolutely, yeah. Because now I have to read Fahrenheit 451. I have to read The African Samurai.
Oh my goodness. Absolutely.
That sounds awesome. That sounds so good.
I was telling Craig that I was crying on the train and he's like, really? Did you tell anybody why? And I'm like, no, I just turned the cover of your book so that everyone could see.
Yeah, that's great. That's good advertising.
Ooh.
How do you know him?
I met him at the Blacklit Durham Festival. So there's in Ajax, there's a community called Blacklit Durham, and it gets writers in the community to come out and do open mics, and they invite Black authors from all around Canada who are, incredibly, well known to, small folks like me who are not well known at all. And, we get up on the stage and we have an opportunity to share our work. And he was there. And I said to him, the majority of the people who attend that event or who had been performers at that event up to him were poets. So dub poets, they spoken word poets, people who have albums of poetry, and like this concept that just was so beyond me, right? And so incredibly intimidating, because in my mind, that's what a poet is, right? This person who gets up on the stage and they're so fluid in their movement and they're well beyond what it is that I'm doing. So the thing I'm doing obviously can't be poetry, right? Like that's where I'm coming from. And then along comes Craig Shreve, and he gets up on the stage and he pulls out his novel and he reads this chapter from this book. And I turned to my husband, quite literally, while Craig was reading. I turned to my husband and I whispered, I'm like, I can do that. Like if you're allowed to do that, I can do that.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, well, like, because on Blacklit Durham, there's a little button that you click. Would you like to perform? Register here, kind of thing. And I had been, hesitating and making all manner of excuses as to why I couldn't do it. And then along comes Craig Shreve. So I had to say to him at my event, like, thank you, because had it not been for you, all of the things that fell into place after seeing him perform would not have happened. Like the invitations to open mics I wouldn't have taken. Like all of those things came from that moment.
Yeah.
Seeing
wow.
this person get up there and not do the thing that I had conditioned my mind to believe was the thing that you had to do when you got up on the stage.
That's so cool.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a little It's a Wonderful Life moment there. Had Craig not existed, then
Yeah. It's that concept of representation matters.
Yeah,
alive and
totally.
well. Like 100%.
It's just such a great example of it.
Yeah, exactly.
It really is. Yeah,
exactly. So that's Craig. So yeah, pick up his book.
Absolutely,
definitely.
We'll link to that as well. We're all about that. I mean, that's really what that was the genesis of this podcast. Really, was like we want to talk about the cool stuff that other artists who not like you say, like not everybody knows them. That's fine. Because there's so many, and there's so many who are doing great work that just people don't know.
So back to Fahrenheit 451. Yes. So that is it's a book that I hesitate to call it a message book, but it is a book dealing with important themes, which obviously resonated with you. How important is that to the books that you read and possibly the books that you sell?
I don't think that I know how important a book is going to be until I've consumed it. Right. So what draws me in is what draws everybody in. Oh, a great blurb on the back, or, they made a great description on the jacket, that inside flap. Or I just trust that writer to write something that's going to be that escapism that I need. Messages, I tend not to do that to myself because I work in an industry that can be a little bit heavy. So when I read, I want to go somewhere else. So
right.
I don't.
Yeah. So for pleasure,
yeah,
escapism.
100%. I don't seek out things that are going to require me to reread the paragraph over and over again. If that happens, fine. But I tend not to do that. And I say that after like knowingly saying that I've read Cemetery Road and how heavy it is, and all of Greg Iles' work is so heavy. One of the books that I really, really liked was The Name of the Rose. And there's so much Latin in that book.
Umberto Eco.
Yeah. And, I watched the movie when I was younger, and I read the book, and I found what was really, really interesting about it was the pacing was so very similar. And then, of course, you read the afterword and how they were very faithful to the book. And same thing with The Manchurian Candidate. So I read The Manchurian Candidate when I was younger, watched the movie when I was younger, and the pacing was so very similar. And those are the kinds of things that I read, right? Like they are things that just kind of capture my imagination and I take me away on this journey. I often don't watch the movie if I've read the book, but in those particular cases, it was the other way around. Like I was young, I watched the movie, and then I read the book later.
I could see watching the movie first. That's probably one of the few times that actually makes sense, because the book it's really dense.
Yeah.
And there's a lot going on there that you don't necessarily need to know about, but if you understand it, it makes it richer. So yeah, I think that having knowing what the carrying story is as you go into it gives you the space to kind of then explore these things. It's
I actually found that with the Harry Potter movies. I went to see 2 or 3 of them before reading the books. I read all the books to my daughters, and the movies kind of left me cold. And then after reading all the books, I went back and watched the movies, and they were completely different movies.
Really?
I enjoyed them so much more.
Because you got the the magic from reading got transferred into the movie then.
And I think there was context there.
Yeah, it colored in some things that they just didn't have time to do in the movies, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be the person to admit on a podcast that I have neither read the books or watched the movies.
Yeah, I've only watched the movies. Yeah, I haven't read the books.
I haven't done neither.
Yeah.
I watched one movie, The Prisoner of Azkaban.
Right, yeah, that's one with
the third one, I think.
That's the only one I watched, and it has a werewolf in it, and I really don't like werewolves. So it was not an enjoyable experience for me.
Sirius Black.
But you know what? There's no obligation to read. They're saying that Harry Potter books are the second most read books next to the Bible.
Oh my goodness!
Really?
So I don't think you're obligated to read. She's had enough readers.
Everyone's covered it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That being said, I really thought that they were good books, and the first one was masterfully constructed and done.
Okay.
That would be my take. Yeah.
I mean, I'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I'll also just say, and I'll just say too that I just watched The Manchurian Candidate. That is a terrific.
Which
film.
one? The Sinatra version or the
Sinatra version?
Yeah, that's a great movie. That's an amazing movie.
I remember sitting on my parents' couch with my dad when that Denzel version came out, and we saw the commercial, and I was like, "What is this? What is this?" And he's like, "Well, I'm going to watch it." I'm like, "I cannot. You let me know, because it looks awful." Was it any good? Did you watch it? Anybody watch it?
It wasn't nearly as good as the first one. No, it wasn't nearly as good, but it was okay.
Okay.
It was okay. But
I
love
kind of
his
a purist
movies.
with I always tend to like the earlier versions of and you'll laugh at me, but a movie like The Parent Trap. So I would get
I agree with
the
you.
Disney, The Parent Trap. Yeah. But I just like it, like the original version of Freaky Friday, the original version of The Parent Trap. All those. They just have a certain charm.
I will not laugh at you. I think that is
Thank you.
Wonderful. And clearly you understand that that's the better quality film.
Yeah. Clearly you have taste. Thank you. Thank you.
Because you agree with me, or I agree with you.
That's right.
I think this might have to do with demographics more than anything else. They have certain
what's that supposed to be?
Because I think sometimes, as I've seen this with some younger people, and they see the remake first, and then they go see the original, and all they can see is the difference in technology, right? Like, for someone who doesn't watch black and white movies, that step back to the original Manchurian Candidate, which is black and white, and there's some really muddy parts to that movie too, right? Because they've got lots of shots of screens, which TV screens back to the early 50s TV screens. They're very bad to start with, and they film those. Yeah, they just can't make the connection. They can't see, because the acting in it is amazing, and the pacing's so great. John Frankenheimer, I love his Frankenheimer. Yeah. The movie I think he made it afterwards. It's called 7 Days in May. Have you folks seen that one?
Oh no.
No.
Oh my God. Okay, so put this on your list. So it's Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas, and the premise is, I don't want to spoil the movie, but the premise is there's a plot to overthrow the government in the United States. Burt Lancaster is part of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I can't remember what he is, a Navy guy or whatever, and he's the senior officer, obviously, and Kirk Douglas is an attaché in the office, and he figures out what's going on. He has to stop this coup. It's essentially a coup. It's really, really good.
All right.
It's so relevant to this time.
Oh,
yes, it is. Yeah. And those actors, Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas.
Ava Gardner's in it. She's great too. Like, it's a really good movie.
7 Days in May. Interesting.
Yeah. It's also black and white, though, I think.
I think I can handle it.
So if that's the barrier, just for other listeners, if that's the barrier for you, then yeah. And I know people that are like that, and it's okay. I get it. You're cutting out yourself off from a whole bunch of interesting culture.
I have no issues with black and white at all. Yeah.
And sometimes it's totally the right choice, even currently.
Yes.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Abby, anything else that you would like to say about Fahrenheit 451 or anything else?
Read it. And if you get the copy that I got was the 60th anniversary edition. It's got a wonderful foreword, and it's got all of these really interesting short articles at the end by all of these different speculative fiction authors. It's really insightful. I really enjoyed the book and those essays at the end. And
Mark, any final thoughts, questions?
Apparently, I'm coming back.
Yeah,
we can talk about Battlestar Galactica and Caprica.
I don't. Yeah. Oh, Battlestar. Okay. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, okay. There's one time when I think maybe the remake was better.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That was a pretty good remake.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I think I'm going to end on that note because that's pretty high. Nice note.
All right. Okay. Abby Grimes, thank you very much for being on our podcast, Recreative.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
And lovely to meet you. So much fun.
So lovely to meet you.
You've been listening to Recreative, a podcast about creativity and the works that inspire it. Recreative is produced by Mark Rayner and Joe Mahoney for Donovan Street Press, Inc., in association with Monkey Joy Press. Technical production and music by Joe Mahoney, web design by Mark Rayner. You can support this podcast by checking out our guests' work, listening to their music, purchasing their books, watching their shows, and so on. You can find out more about each guest and all of our past episodes by visiting recreative.ca. That's re-creative.ca. Thanks for listening.